Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Let's Talk Assassin's Creed, your number one podcast for all things Assassin's Creed. Today's episode is our new topic, and we're doing a quick recap of the modern day story so far. It's a rabbit hole that's gone over for 12, but we're going to try and condense it, make it fun, make it enjoyable, and have a laugh. And we're not alone. Even though the news broke out this week, sadly Josh left us for a brief moment, we are still joined by one of the most amazing members of the Assassin's Creed community that I've joined on their show. They showed me Anchor, and now they're here. We have Andrew from Visions of the Past podcast.
Well, hello.
Finally, I have got you on my show. This has been long overdue.
Yeah, I think it's been 2 months since we last worked together.
About that, yes. And the reason for that, guys, is I was on Spreaker. I realized Spreaker was not very good for doing back and forwards, and this man saved the day by suggesting Anchor, which is how I've been working since, and everything has been better. So I do owe everything to this man here.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So, modern day, 12 years of ups, downs, trials and tribulations, and a community fan base that cannot agree on who is better to deal with, Layla or Desmond.
Just about as many installments, too.
Yes. Is it 12 when Valhalla drops?
I believe so. It was one every year except for 2008 and 2016, and 2 for 2014.
Oof, that's too many. I know Origins and Odyssey were close dropped because, a little known fact, Montreal helped make Odyssey with Quebec. They worked so close together, which is why it dropped at the same time. Well, a year apart, I meant, not at the same time. That would have been mad. I couldn't keep up with that.
We'd have some problems if it was a day and date. I know people did back when Rogue and Unity released day and date.
Oh, I think that drove me crazy because a lot of people weren't transitioning, so a lot of people were playing Rogue and then getting the entirety of Unity spoiled before they even had a chance to move on.
And then
forward.
you'd have the ones who'd have both who didn't know which to play first.
That is an actual valid point. So, where do we begin? The beginning or the end?
I think any conversation about modern day should start with Desmond's saga.
And if we're going to look at Desmond's saga, I think it's best to do a quick, brief overview because Desmond's saga wouldn't exist if we didn't briefly talk about the build-up to where we are now with Desmond, which is essentially the Isu War that started off this whole manhunt for relics. And that's throwing a curveball because I never mentioned this before.
No, that is nowhere in my notes. The Human Isu Wars. It happened. It was Adam and Eve deciding that the order and the suppression of the Isu wasn't right for the human race.
And their genetic makeup spilled after the Great Toga catastrophe, spilled into the bloodlines we have now, which is when we get to the Desmond saga, we meet a young man who has this bloodline, and it's this bloodline that is going to explode a franchise into what it is now.
Yes, absolutely. And when we first met him, he was just a bartender from New York.
That is a great way to start a story. How are you the antagonist to a game? I just tended drinks at a bar.
What do you want me to do? Mix your martini?
Shaken or stirred?
Yes, sir. Desmond was a great entry point for the common man. I mean, he gave you something to relate to. You don't understand what's going on in this world, especially when you first start, and neither did he. It was a great point to start with.
And his story from the first game was a really good one to watch him grow. You know, the story eventually developed from you're in this machine, you're really living a simulation of a memory, which doesn't seem possible, and he didn't believe it's possible. And then he starts seeing writing on the walls from subject 17
He was
or subject
17. He was
16.
seeing it from 16.
My notes are broken. Don't tell me off, people. Seeing notes, and this is where everything changes, because the story so far is he's reliving a memory, and the memory is now bleeding into his real life, and he starts becoming his ancestors' abilities, known as the bleeding effect.
Yeah, the bleeding effect
Which
gives
is
him
crazy.
the ability that Altair had that they called Eagle Vision. And it allowed him to see messages that were left on the walls in blood from Subject 16.
Which then opened the floodgates to who is Subject 16, which, I'm not being rude, we're not going down that rabbit hole, because even I don't understand that rabbit hole fully.
Clay's life
I've been playing since day one.
Yeah, Clay's life is odd, especially when you start talking about the issues that he had with the Animus and the bleeding effect.
So, after the events of Altair, and we discover all we discover with Altair's life, we'll then fast forward to the modern day again, where Desmond's world's once again flipped upside down. Dr. Vidic's companion, crikey, my notes have vanished.
Lucy Stillman.
Actually, Lucy Stillman, thank you for saving me. It's actually a double agent. You've known her through the game as someone who helps you, who's talked to you, but you think she works at Abstergo, but actually she's breaking you out. You are now joining the Resistance, aka the Assassins, but you still don't know what's going on. And this is where the game worked brilliantly. Desmond knew nothing, and we knew nothing. And next thing you know, we're meeting this ragtag of group with Rebecca and my favourite, Sean. Everyone loves Sean.
For the most part, everyone does. I do. To the point to where I follow his voice actor on Twitter.
Stalker.
Danny Wallace is great. He's hilarious.
And so, why don't you go over the events of 2 with the modern day?
2's modern day is kind of interesting, because we start very simply with Lucy starting and breaking out Desmond, but to find out where to go, they take notes from Subject 16's life and they try to find a cross ancestor. This ends up pushing him into the life of Ezio Auditore da Firenze. All they want him to do is learn to be a better assassin, learn to kill, learn to fight. And this works well with the bleeding effect. Desmond is, well, Desmond's Desmond. He goes for 2 nights, I believe. We have, I lost my notes. So there's 2 big goals in the modern day for 2. There's train Desmond, and there's figuring out why Subject 16 stayed so many days in Renaissance Italy. What we find through this one is that Subject 16 left so many notes that leads us to a video of Adam and Eve stealing an apple from the Isu city of Eden. And through this time, Ezio trains Desmond, essentially. Desmond relives, I'm not going to do the math, but it was from the age of 17 to the age of 40 that he relived in about 3 days.
Oof.
And he only had 1 issue with the bleeding effect in that game. He picked up his notes, his moves without an issue, and it ends with this question where Ezio meets an Isu by the name of Minerva, telling him of this great catastrophe that's going to come and that only Desmond can save it. And when explaining her people, she just says, "We simply came before." But before they could learn anything more, Vidic shows up and they run away.
and they keep running. So Events of 2 really stood out to me because this series had gone from this simple concept of a memory simulation to this new ancient beings that came before humans. We learn more, and it drags us into hiding with Brotherhood. And once again, we're reliving Ezio, but this time we're living in his actual villa on the run. And it's in this game, through the memories, we learn more about the Isu, what's to come, but we still don't understand what's happening. And through, I'm trying to remember with the modern day, but the modern day basically try to find answers to the codex that Ezio had.
Well, the big thing about the modern day of Brotherhood was to find where Ezio put that apple, because Minerva had done something to it.
Which I kind of missed out my notes. This is why I should really not transfer my notes to PlayStation properly.
Probably not.
So on the hunt for this apple, and all's going well. You know, they find the clues, they finally get to the apple, and they learn more about the Isu through Minerva. And that, I think this is where things get a bit. I think I turned the game off at this point because I was in utter shock. But upon learning more about the apple and about the Isu and the Great Catastrophe, Desmond is controlled by Minerva. Or was it Juno? I still think Juno.
It was Juno in that one, because they're supposed to be in the ancient temple of Juno underneath. I can't even pronounce the church in Rome, but historically, it's believed that this church was built on top of the temple of Juno, so they put the Colosseum vault there. It all ties in very beautifully with history,
which is stunning. But I do know from I did some research. A lot of people thought it was Minerva manipulating Desmond, but I was strongly sure it was Juno. But during the manipulation, he killed Lucy, because apparently Lucy's not a double agent, she's a triple agent. She's working for the Templars and the Assassins to get back to the Templars.
Yep, it was her idea to leave Abstergo because she felt that Desmond would progress farther through his ancestors with the Assassins.
And I think this is where things take a big sci-fi upsy-turny inception, because upon doing this act, he goes into a coma.
Yep.
And some reason, I wouldn't do it, but he's forced back into the Animus while in a coma.
It was his
to
dad
relive his memory. I know, his dad's evil. I don't like his dad. His dad evil.
Yeah. And Williams, and William, I guess.
And I think this is where Assassin's Creed officially started its sci-fi roots. Up to now, it's been historically accurate as best as can, but now we're actually inside a computer.
Well, I would
say
there is that science fiction fantasy, even at the beginning with the Apple of Eden, but the Animus and everything. This is where you first push into it, and you're in the bowels of the Animus.
Which is mad, because I didn't realize the Animus could create a whole island. I know it was Subject 16's creation of the island, but it's just how this simple computer that was designed from code could create a living land of sorts to harness a memory that could keep expanding through simulations.
I saw it as a hub.
It's in this. That pretty much is a hub.
Because you had Desmond's story there, and then you had Ezio's story, and even at one point after the DLC, you would also have Clay's story.
Damn, I never had the DLC.
Yeah, it's not good.
No, thank goodness. But I didn't know about the Clay, so I always saw it as more like it kind of made me think that the Animus is more alive than people imagine. The simulation isn't just a basic code that can be turned on and off. It's more of a living, manipulating code for the simulation. It's alive. You can manipulate it if you live long enough inside of it, which is trippy. I'm actually trippy now. And the whole idea of Revelations is to find Altair's vault through the keys that Ezio finds. And that's why he travels to Masyaf and I hope I pronounced the name right. And it's in this modern day that you learn more about what's going on with the Isu, the catastrophe, and you learn more about from Clay and his side. Everything that's going on is kind of mind melding. It's kind of a short game in my eyes, but the modern day does feel like it's trying to piece together the events that have all led up into a nice little bow, because it does explain more about the great what's to come. They find out more about the apple and its actual power, and then just at the very end, you wake up.
Well,
which
you learn all of that from, I believe he calls himself Tinia, but it's Jupiter, and you learn all that about the catastrophe, and he tells you where to go, where you're supposed to save the world from. And then you have Clay, who is trying to figure out how to get out of there, but realizes by the end of it that he can't, and ends up saving Desmond's life because the Animus found the Clay's code and decided to delete it. But before he deleted it, pushed Desmond into the Nexus, which rebuilt his mind and allowed him to come out of the coma.
Which is marvelous. And I kind of did forget some of them details, but I was hoping from what I saw in your notes that you could back me up, because I've had some technical difficulties with these notes, so I do apologize. Which at this point, the story's now getting confusing. We started off genetic memories, suddenly the end of the world is coming, well, and you're trapped in the Animus.
What's really interesting is if you take all these 4 games so far, we've only traversed about 2 months of real time, because it starts in September of 2012 and the end of 3 is December 21, 22 of 2012.
Whoa. I never really looked at the calendar properly.
Well, if you look at one, they specifically leave out the year so they could change it if they needed to. The emails just have a date.
But there's no need to change it, because it just kind of fits.
Yep.
It fits nicely as a linear progression. It works really well. It's building up to 3, which I'll pass back to you.
3 was interesting. So they go from Italy to upstate New York to find the Grand Temple. Once they opened, and when I say they, this is the Assassins team that consists of William and Desmond Miles, Sean Hastings, and Rebecca Crane. They use Ezio's apple to open the vault, the Grand Temple. And they go in, and Desmond falls into a fugue state. He falls into another coma. William's bright idea, hey, this worked before, let's put him back in the Animus. Desmond learns from Juno that he needs to find a key to open the inner sanctum of the temple. This brings him into the memories of Haytham Kenway while Haytham's in London. We go through, and he starts living his life. We find out that Haytham is a Templar. He falls in love with a native woman and has a son by the name of Ratika Hayton. I don't remember if it was where the pullouts are, where Desmond comes out of the Animus, but he ends up coming out and finds that he needs batteries for the temple to fully open everything up. There is one that they find walking into the temple, and then there are 3 others. One is in a high-rise building within Manhattan, which Desmond has to, I don't remember the term of the sport, but it's where you basically parachute off of high buildings and cliffs. Base jumping, that's it. So he goes from one building to another, finds a battery, but he also runs into a Templar agent by the name of Daniel Cross. The reason that the assassins are as few numbers as they are. The second battery they find in Brazil around the wrist of a wealthy socialite, which I don't know how you can use that as a bracelet when you look at the size of the thing in the game. It's like as big as somebody's head. But again, Desmond runs into Cross. Both of these times they were able to leave with the battery. The third battery was found in the Museum of Egyptian Antiquities in Cairo. This time, though, William went to retrieve it, and this would leave Desmond to look for the key, where the final resting place was. William ended up getting captured by Juhani Otto Berg and taken to Italy, where Desmond was first held by Vidic. Vidic gives this emotional, well, I guess it really wasn't emotional. It was, at this point, he's a mustache twirling villain. And he basically said, bring me the apple and you can have your dad. And that's probably the dumbest thing he could have ever said, because Desmond decides to go. And you heard the old adage of bringing a knife to a gunfight. Well, taking the apple is like that, because it controls people's minds. And Desmond just walks in and convinces everybody to kill themselves. Except for Daniel Cross, who at one point had him pinned, but he experienced the bleeding effect, which allowed Desmond to end his life. He goes, saves his dad, and they go back to New York. And when he plugs in each battery, he learns from Juno each of the 6 ways that the Isu had tried to protect from the first great catastrophe. So at this point, he knows he needs to find the key. He relives Rata Hayton's life until he gets the key from, oh goodness, what is Charles Lee? Because he spends the whole game yelling about, bring me Charles Lee. I forgot his name. But we find that he buried the key at the Davenport homestead. They retrieve the key, and Desmond meets Juno face to face. And Juno says, touch this pedestal, you'll save the world. And at that moment, Minerva shows up and says, don't do it. Saving the world's going to release Juno from her capture, I guess is the wrong word, imprisonment in the Grand Temple. Juno would then respond by having Minerva show Desmond what would happen if the solar flare would strike. And then she narrates telling Desmond that what would happen is that he would be remembered as a god, and that eventually his words would be used instead of rebuilding life and saving life as a encouragement to justify taking it. Minerva would go on and saying, you can't do this, the life will live on, blah, 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 blah. Well, Desmond says, well, my mind's made up. Everybody needs to get out. I'm going to set her free because we will find a way to stop her. He touches the pedestal. The Aurora Borealis device, global Aurora Borealis device, activates, stops the solar flare, and life continues at the cost of his life and the releasing of Juno.
And that you would expect to be the end of the series. No, there's more. I love saying that. There's more. Now,
but wait.
This is where there's more. So as we are running out of time, and because I know how each of these games follow, I think it's best if we condense Black Flag to Syndicate in one thread, because the modern day story for Unity and Syndicate, I don't remember much because it didn't feel very weighty. It was very quick succession.
There is 3 or 4 cutscenes in each game, I think, and that's about it.
Yes. So there's not much. So we'll cover them all together because there's still got Layla's story to go. So Black Flag, you are now no one. I'm going to basically say you're no one because there's no modern day. It's going to be you, but it doesn't feel like you. It's weird to explain.
They use the nickname Noob for Black Flag.
I feel like a noob when I describe the modern day.
It's meant for you to try to feel like you're more important. You're not more important, that you're really the one doing it.
And the modern day for this one was really interesting, and because it follows Abstergo's now using memories for games, a really good concept, and you're basically filtering through Edward Kenway's life to help make a new pirate game, which we all know Black Flag is an amazing game. But as you continue through the modern day, you are charged with hacking a lot of the computers to figure out what's really going on by, I'm going to call him the janitor because his name's left my memory.
John Standish, the head of IT.
That's the one, John Standish, but I like to call him Mr. Janitor because he looks like a janitor.
Yeah, he's got that full body jumpsuit.
And he essentially is trying to help you uncover a secret. But the secret is nothing to do with the Templar business, it's to do with him himself. Because this is where we get another curveball. He is actually a sage, which we learn about in Black Flag, but we see a bit more in the modern day. That's how I'm going to refer it. And a sage is basically the incarnation of Juno's husband. Over years, he takes another, I'm going to call it human host. Someone is born a host to the sage, who his mission is to frame you and then kill you and bring Juno back.
Yeah, he wants Juno to take your body at this point. He wants Juno to live on through you.
Which is a complete mind meld, but it fails. He is killed.
Yep, he's shot while he's standing over Noob, yelling, "Guide me into the gray."
He's killed, and then we get on to Unity, because what actually happened during Rogue, I can't tell you because I can't actually remember
There's
the
not a
modern
lot
day.
to Rogue. It's essentially the same thing, except you're running as a different analyst by the name of Numbskull, going through Shay's life, and really all you're doing is learning more about Otto Berg, and he has you upload Shay's life as a way of saying, I'm coming for you.
I'm coming. This sounds terrifying. So this moves us on to Unity and Syndicate, both together. And from what I've gathered, because I've replayed them, but I still don't understand the modern day, but you are basically playing a video game from Abstergo, and then you stumble into the Helix server, and you're recruited by Bishop, who is brave enough to reveal her face to a random stranger. Like, why would an assassin do that?
She doesn't get the real name doesn't come out though either, because Sean's in it as well, but I don't remember. He uses a code name as well.
But come on, we all know your fears. We can identify you in a crowd.
What was it? I'll remember.
I can't remember.
I'll remember
but
eventually.
From what I remember, the modern day, I'm struggling because I can't grasp it properly. Is essentially you're charged with looking through Arno and the Fry Twins' life to find a bit more information on Pieces of Eden. Unity, Bishop wanting to help you locate his body for, I think it's the Sword of Eden.
She's looking for a sage because it's all about stopping the Phoenix Project.
That's the one. I'm thinking of Syndicate because we're trying to find the Shroud. See, this is the problem. The modern day up to this point was good, but Unity and Syndicate, I feel like I'm getting confused because there's a lot more weight to the past than there is to the modern day cutscenes. So I'm not struggling because I don't know it. I'm struggling because the in-game stuff was more meatier and playable than the cutscenes. And I think that's just going to jump us straight to Origins because I don't think there's much more to cover from Unity and Syndicate, sadly.
No, not unless we go
Origins.
Big into the detail, because at that point we're there is one important thing. At the end of Syndicate, we see that actually, surprisingly, the Templars won. They were the ones with the Shroud. But it turns out that it was Juno who was manipulating the Phoenix Project. But sadly, that story ended up getting finished in Assassin's Creed Uprising.
Which is annoying, but I will be doing an episode on that at some point. Just sneak that in there. So this brings us to Origins, and I'm going to pass back to you for Origins.
So at this point, the modern day has essentially jumped to the point to when the game releases is the day in the year. So we've jumped to October of 2017, and we pick up with Layla Hassan. She's a member of Abstergo's historical tactical team, which most of this stuff you wouldn't know unless you checked out the emails. And they were sent to retrieve an artifact in Egypt's Qattara Depression. She goes off mission because she wants to test her portable animus on a mummy that she found. This pushes her into the life of Bayek of Siwa, and it proves that her animus works. She's assisted by her friend Deanna, I believe she pronounces it Gary. And during their testing, Sigma's team eventually comes because they went off mission. Deanna kept giving her a constant reminder, and this is where we learn that Layla is rather stubborn because she says, no. If we check in, they're just going to take my work. But we also learn that this stubbornness ends up getting Deanna killed, and it ends up with Layla strapping on Bayek's hidden blade and using his skills that she learned via the bleeding effect to take out Sigma team. With Origins ending with Miles, William Miles, who at first I didn't recognize him because he looked younger than he should have. And her threatening to kill him, but he says that you should join my team. But she doesn't join the assassins, but she does agree to work with them. And it's probably the longest helicopter, because he says that helicopter will arrive in an hour, and it never comes.
And that jumps us to Odyssey and a small inconsistency in the story, because I'll quickly fill this in, but during the end of Origins and the start of Odyssey, I don't know how people know this, I'm looking into it as we speak, but she works with Charlotte from the comics. I hope I pronounced the name right.
That's in an email in Odyssey.
In an email. She works with that team with the Phoenix Project and lots of other stuff.
She was close to Charlotte.
Which kind of tries to fill in the gap, but Odyssey starts a huge time jump. She's now with her own team.
It's a year after Origins. They stay with the real time, so it's October 2018 now.
That's perfect. But still, we don't know what's really gone on between then to now.
Right, we don't know what mission she's on. We don't know exactly how she learned where to find the spear and the lost book. We just pick up with her finding them.
And basically, it's an intriguing modern day locked behind a gameplay loop that is not too tasty for some. But the modern day is very intriguing because we talked about this in our joint episode a bit, but during all this looking through Cassandra's life, I'm choosing Cassandra because she is the canon protagonist. I know some did say Alexios, but I will be wording Cassandra as I played a lot as Cassandra. And journeying through Cassandra's life, she starts to see more about the Isu influence on ancient Greece. And they help her find Atlantis, which is an Isu vault, which it will be the first Isu vault we've seen since Revelations. No, wait, since 3. We didn't technically see one in Black Flag.
Was the observatory. We saw bits and pieces. If I cut out or we're starting to get a thunderstorm.
Scary.
Wondered why.
So we see, and we uncover Atlantis, and this is going to be the first of the series because we don't usually talk about DLC, but we need to.
Yes, absolutely.
And at this point, once you discover Atlantis and you play through the entire Odyssey, you then eventually meet Cassandra.
Yep.
From the past, she comes because the staff of Hermes has kept her alive, and she passes the staff to Layla, asking her to, once all this is finished, to destroy everything. Because in her ear, this whole time, we've had Is it Althea? Or
We have a few people in Layla's ear. Most notably is Dr. Victoria Babo.
and the Isu Althea, is it? Alethea, and the Isu Alethea, who's been murmuring stuff about how she may be this destined warrior, I'm going to call it, because it's what it feels like she's trying to build her up. Whereas I am agreeing with you, it's something fishy is going on, but apparently the staff chose her. She's meant to be the next staff bearer. And then we're going to jump to the DLC Fate of Atlantis, because this is where things get truly interesting. Because we're now tasked with reliving Cassandra's again, but to learn more information about the staff through simulations in a simulation.
Right. We are reliving Cassandra's memories in the Animus of Cassandra living simulations that Alethea made to teach her how to use the staff.
Just proves that the Animus is not as basic as we think. And this is where things get crazy, because after all this, Alethea starts to wonder if she made the right choice. Was Layla the one? Because if you read the emails, Layla is prone to anger issues. She's very aggressive. She's very addictive to the Animus, and I think she's having problems with the bleeding
Absolutely,
effect.
because we see a lot more of her anger and aggression come out after she relives a little bit of Deimos's life.
So we can tell that this bleeding effect that's been so calm and stable is unstable for Layla. And I think I'm correct, but somewhere on the wiki, Layla's percentage of Isu DNA to human DNA is a lot lower than most people.
It definitely seems that way, but I don't remember where I don't remember seeing that confirmed anywhere what her percentage is.
There's no confirmed, so this is a theory, but I think this is why the staff is maybe corrupting her more, because she may not have a high enough percentage to protect her from it, just like others, like Desmond did. And filled with rage and anger, she kills Dr. Vidic, and she then attacks Berg and paralyzes him. This is a pivotal moment for Layla, because she's been a basic antagonist all the way through, but now we see rage, aggression, addiction to the Animus, a bleeding effect gone wrong, and temptation from the staff colliding into a mind that is already chaos. And it leaves us wondering, where can Layla go next? Hero or villain? I say villain.
I'm hopeful for villain, but what we're seeing is we don't know where the end point is. Did Cassandra say go destroy all the pieces of Eden? Does she say tear down the assassins and the Templars? It's saying destroy it, destroy them all. Makes me feel that it's the staff and all of the pieces of Eden, but it's very unclear.
But at the same time, there is that little inkling that Althea, can't pronounce names tonight, did mention that we're not taking a back seat anymore. So the Isu must still be alive, means the Isu could be coming back.
Does this mean something like that happening if they continue with what the empirical truth started, making you think that there's a possibility that they can change the code of time and possibly rebirthing the Isu?
And I think maybe Cassandra knows that because of her instincts as a mercenary and her life, maybe she knows that there's more to the Isu than letting on. And maybe Layla's job isn't just to destroy the Isu artifacts or the assassins, but to put a stop to the war by destroying everything. Her chaos destroys everything, the assassins, the Templars, and the Isu, because we know one can't survive without the other.
And there's I don't remember who proclaimed it, but there is a end of the world theory prediction. I don't remember the name of the lady, but it was said in 1962 that essentially a war would erupt in 2020, causing the destruction of the world. And it would be it's an interesting way you can tie that into the Norse myth of Ragnarok, the end of all things. You can tie it into a lot of different things that Valhalla could approach on. And hopefully it doesn't feel too real world at that point.
But at the same time, and you mentioned it in your empirical truth message, one of the notes did explain about how Desmond sacrificing broke the timeline essentially, and it needs to fix itself.
Yep.
That another extinction event is coming. And what if this is the extinction event that is coming? A war between everyone. Because we know through Pythagoras that one cannot survive the other. We cannot have order without chaos, and we can't have chaos without order. So something's got to come to fruition that destroys everything.
And that was essentially the idea behind Alethea's simulations. She showed a world that was all order. She showed a world that was all chaos, and even showed the world together that was both. And even that had failed.
Just proves that maybe life cannot live with order and chaos, and maybe the world always needs that bit of destruction to stay normal. But that's new territory we have yet to discover with Valhalla. And I think that's all we have time for tonight, sadly. Longer than I expected. But we went down the rabbit hole that's modern day. How could you not expect it to be this long?
There's a lot there, and some of it's good, some of it's not so good. Some of it I wish was a little bit different. But I'm curious on to see how Valhalla integrates it, especially with some of the news from the demo that we've heard. So I'm curious, and I don't want to say excited, kind of like more apprehensive and just kind of waiting to see how it turns out.
I'm excited because I'm just an idiot. I just love everything Assassin's Creed. I'm always going to get excited. They blooming can spew out a mobile game and I'll get hyped up like a little girl about it. But I do think they have some interesting developments to come. And I think, judging by what someone described, how Layla can become part of the simulation, has gotten me thinking a lot more about the Animus Island from Revelations.
It's right now a lot of it's theory. Why is she needing to do these Animus puzzles, and what will it show? Will it show us something like the Truth did in Assassin's Creed 2 between the glyphs of 2 and the rifts of 3, or Brotherhood? Will it expand our knowledge of the Isu? Will it just expand our knowledge of the world? Will it show us what happens outside the games, like Assassin's Creed Gold or Uprising, or they could go anywhere?
They could go anywhere, but there is one place we all know they're going, and if you haven't heard it yet, please go back and watch the very first trailer overview. I highly recommend it, and the articles afterwards, but it's noted this game will tie everything up from 1 to Valhalla. So we can be certain that every loose thread is going to be tied in a way we don't know how it will work, but I can promise you that any game after Valhalla will not follow the same timeline from 1 to Valhalla, which is exciting.
I'm just wondering if we're going to get an ending much like 3, where our protagonist dies and an Isu walks off saying, "Now it's my world."
Or, as I jokingly put the other day, an Isu guy wakes up and he's secretly been living this simulation for 12 years.
I've seen, I've thought that might be a way of ending the series, but doing that alienates your entire fan base. There's no way that's going to happen.
Oh, I know, but come on, Josh mentioned it a while back, but could you imagine how funny it would be that the very last Assassin's Creed, just some Isu guy walks out and goes, "Well, the simulation failed, the catastrophe is happening, nothing we can do about it." Game ends, and we're all like, "What? We just played 20 games, it was all just part of a simulation?" This is
Well,
rubbish.
you kind of get that in the empirical truth because they talk about perception and reality and what that means to a person. How can you not be sure you're in a simulation?
Oh, don't. That's going to start the real world thing that we're all living in the Matrix.
Well,
red or blue pill. So we're going off topic here, but I think this is as much as we have time for. Wow, it's been amazing to catch up with you again. I hope to work with you more. And next week, I will promote it now. Something special is coming. That's all I'm going to say. I'm working very closely with my new partner, Landmarks, and I'm going to be working with Andrew again, just because his script work is amazing compared to mine. But next week's episode is a very special one, and I hope you all tune in to listen to that, and I hope you all have a good weekend.